Don't just take my word for it, take His word for it. Welcome to the All In with Jesus podcast. I'm Beth Leanna, and I'm excited you're here. We're going to dive into Scripture together. We're going to talk about some of the things the Lord is doing in the body of Christ right now. We're going to have guests on to share their testimonies, and let's just talk about all things Jesus. Let's get this started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the All In with Jesus podcast. I'm Beth Leanna, and I am here today with my awesome cousin, Andrew Mahan. A lot of people call him Drew, but I was raised calling him Andrew. And he just has an amazing testimony. And when I heard his testimony, I was like, I want to have him on to share with others, to help others, maybe things they're going through, or I just think it's a wonderful testimony of his faith and his bravery and his courage and putting his faith in Jesus. And I'm so thankful to have you today and share with us all that you've been through and how you've came out. And I just think it's an amazing testimony, like I said, of courage and bravery and just being strong through trials and difficulties. So do you want to start with anything in particular?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the good words. This is my cousin. She's great. There's only a few special people that call me Andrew still. So some people that used to call me Andrew, I don't see them very much anymore. I just say that. But the ones that I do, there's only a couple really special people call me Andrew. Now, there's a group of people, very small, that call me Andy. Now, that's off limits. My mom and dad told me from when I was growing up. They said, whatever, Andrew. And then when I changed it to Drew on my own in 6th grade. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Just thought, I need a new identity, I guess. And so I became Drew, and then mom and dad still call me Andrew. But now mom she calls me Andrew. Yes, at 44, she still gets upset, and I will hear Andrew Michael. Yes. But a lot of times it's Drew Man, because my nieces call me Drew Man and stuff like that. But anyways, so a few people call me Andy. I know I tell a lot of stories, but so I'm sitting with my very first ministry job. I was welcomed in with like a little dinner and stuff, right? So I'm sitting with this guy. I'm a little bit nervous. There's this older gentleman there at the table, and we're talking and going on, and he's like, well. He said, Andrew, so have you always been Andrew, Drew? And I was like, yeah. And I was making kind of, small talk or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, a lot of people call me Drew. Some people call me Andrew, but nobody calls me Andy. He kind of leaned back. He goes, why not? I said, because I just don't like it. So my mom and dad told me when I was young, don't be called Andy. And it stuck with me. I cannot stand the name does something to me. Yeah. I think everybody can kind of see where this is going. He said, well, you know what? He goes, but I've not even introduced myself. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. He goes, I'm sorry. He said, he stuck in his hand. He goes, my name's Andy Reese. And I was like, I was totally joking. I knew who you were. Yeah. His first cousin was a guy named Pee Wee Reese. Some of the viewers and listeners, especially those that that are my friends, Pee Wee Reese was a good baseball player. Oh, played with awesome. Jackie Robinson over at the Dodgers. Anyways, that's a long story. Yeah. Thank you very much. Welcome, Molly. I don't know why you didn't say welcome to the most special guest here. This is Molly. Got out when I got here. Yes, it's my fault. She ran out. Yeah. No, I'm happy to sit down with you. I really am. I just think there's a lot of things that I've gone through. I've got kind of something to say at the beginning, but basically what I'm going to share, and I've really realized a lot of things just even in the past few months. That God has shown me kind of why certain things happen. Why he allowed me to go through certain things and kind of what I did to cause a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But basically my story has a lot to do with ministry trauma, the way that I coped, that I basically stepped away from the Lord at a very crucial part of what I was going through. And then some other people who didn't have my best interest at heart, and it kind of all swirling around at the same time. And basically, I had 6 really, really, really bad years. Mm-hmm. Now, some people might think, okay, I'm 44. I already said that. I mean, 6 years out of your life, that's, a seventh or whatever. I was told there'd be no math when we showed up. But anyways, that's still 6 years is a good chunk of time. But what has happened these past few months, God has allowed me to kind of step back and look to see that my life has not been ruined by the things that I went through and the things that I did. It was very, very painful, and I caused a lot of pain for other people, some very close to me. But again, it was 6 years. Now, my responsibility now is to make sure that I don't ever get to that spot again. So what I wanted to say kind of from the beginning is those of you that are going to be listening and watching this, don't check out because it's going to sound a lot at the beginning like I'm blaming other people, and I don't want to do that at all. I just think that the truth of everybody's situation is where no matter what comes first, there are things that are done to you that are really, really difficult. And it's because people are human, and you can be on the receiving end of things. Even when your life is going great and you have the best of intentions, things happen that are unfair. Right. There are things that we can do out of response to that, the decisions that we make, that can just blow everything up even worse. Yes. But also the opposite can be true. We can start and then start to kind of, we can start by making bad decisions and hurting people, and then we get ourselves cleaned up. But then the way they respond can just keep breaking things. So my story is one that while I was not a perfect person by any means, wasn't a perfect person to live with. I wasn't a perfect dad. I wasn't a perfect pastor. Still, looking back, I was doing at that time, I was close to the Lord, and I was doing what I thought I needed to do. And then some things were going on later broke down. What I wanted to say that from the beginning, though, is that just hang with me, because I do believe there are things that happen and there's a way to respond. I like to try to live my life somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Understanding those things that happen, taking full responsibility and accountability for the things that I did, but then knowing that it's getting through those things, and it's that God's the only one that got me through it. There are some other very important people. Go ahead. Part of it.
I was going to say, I didn't mention earlier, but he is an amazing pastor. He's not head of a church right now, but he is still a pastor and has that pastoral role. It's a gift, because let me tell you, he's been pastoring me and helping me through scripture and just so many things. So he still has that shepherd's heart, and even though he's not in the role of a pastor right now. And I also want to point out, too, what you said about accountability. That's one thing we're not seeing right now, and that's one thing I appreciated so much about your testimony, is that, yes, you share what happened, when other things happened around you that you couldn't control, but also just, having that accountability also. And I think that's important to share.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and about being a pastor too. Thank you very much. It's crazy because that has never changed. Even in the middle of my worst times, I didn't have a lot to offer people, but at the same time, here I am kind of wallowing in my own stuff, and I still had an opportunity to speak into people's lives. At that point, being very honest with people, I could share, here's what I've done, here's what I'm going through right now, but here's what I see in your life, and being able to listen to people and stuff like that. So I don't know, it's been good, and you just can't deny certain things, in your life, and although I didn't want to play that role a lot, still that's never left. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. I will tell you, so just real quick to start out, I was called to the ministry when I was in college. I was headed towards law school. That was my plan. I was playing college baseball. My background was I got saved when I was 9 years old. I remember coming forward when I was 5 because my big brother got baptized at our church, and I thought that was really cool. And I was smart enough to know what he said to get to do that, and so I said the same things. So the preacher was like, okay. And then a few years later, I told my mom and dad, I said, I don't think that was right. I think I know now. And so they talked to me about it, and in those days, that was back, and even sometimes now, a lot of your churches, Preacher Hickey was huge, right? Like, he was the man. So yes. Although my dad talked to me through it, and I was fine, still there was a responsibility. Now you got to talk to the pastor's son. So I had to call Preacher Hickey, and he was very gentle with me. And I was telling him, he said, well, we got to get baptized. Now that you're a Christian, you got to get baptized. Basically, kind of explained that I was just a wet sinner last time, So basically kind of what he told me. So anyways, I got baptized again. And, so that was me. So I grew up in the church, and even when we had a few years away from the church because a lot of things fell apart. Even though I spent some time away, when I got my license and I could drive, I remember just taking my little brother to church, even though our family was kind of in and out a little bit. So as a teenager, became part of a youth group. Grew up in First Baptist Church in Corbin. Later, that was my first youth ministry position, where I insulted Andy Reese. He was a great man, by the way. Awesome. He's always treated me great. But anyways, so I served there. Just really got started kind of growing up in ministry. Love the church, love it to this day. There's some wonderful people that were still there. A lot of the folks were older, they've passed on. It's just, anyways, I got my start there. Pastor Barry Howard and Lynn Huff and Phil Majors, who sadly just passed away. A lot of you folks that have watched this know that he just passed away not too long ago. But those folks were very crucial in my life and me growing up. Became a teacher at Corbin High School. In the middle of all that, left First Baptist. Then later I joined staff at Grace on the Hill, another church here in Corbin for those that are out of town. It's a Methodist church, but we functioned as like a non-denominational church. Was there for a few years, then really just felt the call to start a church. Ended up, after having a good talk with some close folks there at Grace on the Hill, stepped out, started a church called Forward Community Church. Later, we kind of called it Forward Church. We were at the movie theater in Corbin, and so it was during that and kind of the rise of our church then when things started kind of falling apart. I'm going to mention things. I've got notes in front of me just to keep the dates in mind. You know some of the things I'm getting ready to share. I call this next part, this was just the trauma. This is where some really tough things happened. I'll say at the onset, I have relationships with churches pretty much all over the country, but especially in Southeast. And one of them, a very large church, after talking with them and some other folks, what we went through and what I went through as a pastor of a small church and what we went through as a church and families, these are things that other churches go through, but not all at once, all like the intensity of it.
Yeah. All at the same time, kind of.
Yeah. So this was some of the trauma. Well, when I was up at Grace on the Hill, we had some things that were going on that were outside of me. Just human interaction that kind of got kind of sinful, and things it just got really tough. And so I knew that and it didn't involve me. Like I said, I knew that I was kind of coming out of that. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of personal trauma there because of trying to figure out how to be a youth pastor and all that. I was not in charge of church, and I was not there to change the church. I was there to minister to families and teens.
Right.
So ended up stepping out, started Forward Community Church, 2011. 2013, we had a little girl in our church. Her name was Maddie, and she was just the light of our children's ministry. She looked like a little orphan Annie with her little ringlets and stuff like that. And so her dad was in and out of court. He was in drug court. He made a mistake, got put back in jail for a little bit. I was visiting him there in jail. Great guy. And he asked me to go check on his little girl because he hadn't seen her in a while. Long story short, during that time, his mom had started getting back into drug manufacturing, and a lot of it was meth, and there was a boyfriend involved, and the boyfriend ended up killing Maddie. And we found out about that. I got a call late one night, and so that was very, very difficult, kind of leading the church through that. And all of our children's ministry volunteers, right? Like, I just remember the first time they were going through the attendance book, as kids would come in, they had a little code and we'd check them in. And I just remember seeing somebody for the first time go by Maddie's name. We couldn't erase it. We couldn't remove it from our system. That was very, very difficult. That ended up,
imagine.
It was so traumatic. So that was the first thing. That was in 2013. 2015 February. This was even worse than that. This one kind of set my life on a tough course, and also our church. In a lot of ways, we never healed from it. But there was a young man who was one of our very first volunteers at our church. Started coming early. Heard about us. He got a job at the movie theater, and so he kind of knew something was going on. We had started, not that we were keeping this big secret, but we wanted to kind of develop some things before we launched. Mm-hmm. So we talked as a leadership team and all that. Well, this young man finds out and just asks me on Facebook, "Can I please come be a part?" So he started before our church even really got going. So he was our number one volunteer. Well, his parents were going to a different church, and he finally just he begged them, "I love this place," and so they all came as a family. Well, some of the folks that are listening or watching will remember that in February of 2015, this happened on February 11th. long story short, he got into it with his dad. He was adopted. His little sister was adopted. They did not know. Neither one of them knew, but they were actually biological brother and sister. They were adopted from the same young lady that the mom had a connection to. And anyway, so Jason, after a bad few weeks at home, he killed his little sister. And it was all one by one. His sister got home from school. He shot and killed her. Dad comes home, shoots and kills his dad. Mom comes home from work, shoots and kills her. He arranges them a certain way, and he makes sure he's clean. And then he went to church that night. That was a Wednesday night. So he shows up. We had no clue. My boys, they were always there for the first hour, getting ready, because we did as a family, and then we had a room set up for them. That way they weren't around all the teens and stuff. Well, Jason would always come early, ping pong, piggyback rides, playing with my boys. It was all the same. Did not know.
Oh my goodness.
His car was loaded with guns and ammunition. He had thousands of dollars in his pockets. It was wild.
Yeah.
So he ends up driving all throughout the Northeast. The Corbin police got a call and said, you need to go do a welfare check on a certain place. We just now got in a shootout with somebody driving this car. The car was registered there. We ended up finding out that Jason had gotten in a shootout with police, and they killed him. And then because of that, that's what set off the investigation. Now, his mom, dad, and sister had been in the house since that Wednesday. Now, this was a Saturday. This was going on. So anyways, they launches in this investigation. There was a half sister that lived in Georgia, and that was it. She didn't want anything to do with anybody in Corbin, understandably. Her whole family's just wiped out. So I was pastor, and I didn't have to do anything with the funeral, but still leading the church and leading sections of the community through this too, because the school had just lost two students. Union College had just lost a professor. The city just lost a city worker. There were so many people affected by this, and because of just my nature, first of all, but also the position I held in their life, I was a spokesperson whether I liked it or not.
Right.
So what started happening was I was not sleeping or anything, and so when nobody knew, I actually started drinking alcohol. I would do it to fall asleep. I drank just a little bit, so I knew I had something kind of in the house somewhere, but I started doing that, and that turned into a couple of months of really bad time. Ended up getting through that. Some folks ended up finding out, we talked through it and everything, got better. I'm going to continue. Then, so the very next year, my middle son had a very massive seizure. Lasted over 20 minutes. I was alone with him. He ended up stopping breathing. I had to give him some rescue breaths and stuff like that. It was really, really traumatic. Ambulance came, took him away. He woke up once he got to the hospital. It was really funny because he didn't know where he was. He was mad. When I got there, he goes, "Dad, come here." I said, "What, buddy?" He goes, "Come here." So I leaned down. He said, "Why am I here? I want to leave now." I was like, "Well, son, everything, we're okay." And it was basketball
so
season.
Scary to wake up and not know where you
he was 10.
were. And,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was really tough. But anyways, that was 2016. He was 10 years old. Then a couple months after that, there was a gentleman that I was counseling, and the counseling situation was way over my head. I had not had any training in this, very traumatic stuff. So what I was doing was I was going with him to another counselor. He ended up just kind of later in the process just quit going. He quit coming to church. Then I got a call from his wife. He committed suicide. That was really difficult on our church. Then just a couple months after that, another gentleman who had just started volunteering in our church, he had asked to meet with me, and I was terrible about my schedule, and I had an incredible young lady that worked with me then. Her name's Katie, and Katie would keep my schedule, and so a lot of times it was easy for me. Somebody come up and say, "Hey, Drew, can we have lunch? What are you doing this week?" And I would say, "I have no clue, but yes, I will. If you don't care, go talk to Katie. She's got my schedule." That's the way I had to handle it. Yeah. So this guy never would go to Katie. Well, finally he did, and then we had the lunch set for a Monday, and I was at a staff meeting and was going to cut it short a little bit to go have lunch, and his girlfriend let us know that he had committed suicide as well. That was just a couple of months. So in and out of all that, I was not sleeping, and I would drink a little bit more, and then I'd not, and then I'd drink a little bit more, and then it caused some problems at home once we started kind of figuring out. Then I felt like I had a pretty good handle on it. But folks at church, not because of the drinking, they just knew I was getting burned out. I needed to do something. And I begged along the way too. I was like, guys, I need to do something, go somewhere. I wasn't talking about like going to a rehab. I was just talking about getting away for a little bit. A lot of pastors call it a sabbatical. I'd been in ministry for a long time. I'd never really had a break. It just so happened that that a few folks in my life said, well, you're going to go away whether you like it or not, and here's where you're going to go. They already a place chosen and everything. So I resisted at first because I knew that my issues weren't as deep in that area as what was kind of being projected. But then I was given an ultimatum, and I said, no problem. That's good. I'm going. Mm-hmm. So I went to Haiti, and then right as soon as I got back from Haiti, then I went to Florida for a month. That was really difficult. I never thought I'd ever be in a situation like that, but stopping drinking was no problem when I got down there. It was great. I mean, I got healthy. I was missing my kids like crazy and all that. So my life, and I was missing the church. I didn't know what was happening. A lot of pastors think that things can't go on without them. I was in that too, right. Especially because it was a new church. Right. I just felt like, well, if I'm not there making decisions, what in the world's going to happen, right?
Well, and there had been through so much that you were worried about, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I thought, gosh, who's going to, we're still dealing with just heartache and heartbreak. Yes. This person and this trauma. Person. Mm-hmm. And it's stuff that, like I said, I later found out that other churches had gone through, just not boom, 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 right after one or after another. Other pastors had gone through it too, but they always had like a bigger team of people. I had a smaller group of people that lived their own lives, and here I was. I felt lonely. At times it was because I made myself lonely looking back, and other times it's because I was lonely. Right. So anyways, I went away, and but that started kind of the unraveling of my ministry and also my personal life too. Mm-hmm. What I said earlier about people doing things first, there was a lot of that. A lot of it from folks that I really thought were very close friends. Mm-hmm. There were some other relationships that I thought that we were in a good spot, ended up not. So it became, when I got back from Florida, it was like everybody was in self-preservation mode, whether it was the people who were my friends, but they had other interests involved. They had other business ventures that could be affected by me, political aspirations that could be affected by me. If they look down the road and they're like, okay, this part of Drew's life is not going to be good, so we need to go ahead and kind of make arrangements. Well, all those things were, it happened without me knowing. I knew some stuff wasn't right, but I didn't know to what extent that certain things were being planned. Well, so I'm just trying to, here I come back, seeing my kids again, trying to work on my home life and everything, and things it looked okay for a little bit, then it just started really falling apart. Well, I didn't know where ministry landed and all that. Asking for certain, counselors for pastors, like who does a pastor go to get counseling and all that. I didn't know what was going on. And so in late January of 2018, that's when my home situation just really fell apart. Well, soon after that, the church situation fell apart because a couple of folks came to me that had known what was going to happen, and they said, you need to step down. You're no longer our pastor. Then it became like how the process was set up about how to get rid of me, how to fire me. Like we had to really kind of dive into that. And those steps weren't followed, and so I said no, I'm sticking around. So then we got kicked out of our location a week before Easter, and then immediately lost most of our volunteers, our key people in our church. So I knew that even overnight, like my income was gone too. Mm-hmm. I went into a deep, deep, dark place in my life. Mm-hmm. Started trying to fill up all this void with everything else besides clinging to the Lord. Mm-hmm. Because I knew I was a Christian, was still a pastor, still had those responsibilities, still a lot of blessings in my life, still had my sons, trying to work on that, but I just had a void in my life that I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was in a situation I'd never been in. Right. That's the chapter of what people did. The next part is how I reacted. To make things kind of quick, because I could talk about each one of them all day long. I had noticed that I needed to respond to somehow. There's a couple of comical things that I do have to say before I start this point, because it's so unbelievable what I'm going to tell you is so unbelievable. This is just this is the big one,
Yeah.
but this is an example of something that happened. So, because of things going on in my personal life, you need services from certain professions and things like that, right? So this person came to me and said, "Hey, I want to, I want to be involved." And I was like, "You're too close to the situation. We got other ways to do this." Well, he became angry, and the way that he responded to me not including him at a deeply personal level was he went and got all of my legal documents that were filed that were public knowledge. Mm-hmm. He had them translated into Haitian Creole into several copies. Have I not told you this?
Seems like I remember something about it. Yeah.
So he had it translated into Haitian Creole. So for those that don't know, I had spent 9 years going to Haiti ever since the earthquake. It was 8 years, but 2 trips in 1 year. So I'd been there 9 times. And he called ahead. He hired a driver in Haiti, and he flew down there, and he found out every ministry location that I'd been to, and he took a copy of all of my legal documents, translated into Creole, and he went to people and he said, "You need to know who Drew Mahan is. You need to know exactly how his life has fallen apart. You don't want to do ministry with this fella."
Oh my goodness! So he spread it all over Haiti.
Yeah. So these Haitian people. The good thing was, I had a really good relationship with those folks, and they started like messaging me on Facebook real quick. "Drew, are you okay? Who is this man? What in the world's going on?" It was pretty funny.
I mean, it's funny, but it's not. It's not. You have to laugh at it, but
to think that somebody would take that much time.
Yes.
One of the other things that happened that was a pretty big deal. I was on boards of charities and some things down at the Cumberlands and all that. That was fine. I finished out my terms there at Cumberland, but there was one charity that I was on board of, and there was somebody involved on that board that was heavily involved in my personal situation, and that person didn't want me on that board anymore. And so I had done nothing to disqualify myself from that or anything, but I got a call from the president of that organization, and they said, "Drew, listen, man, you're going through a lot. We've talked, and it'd be best if you step down for a little bit." And again, there had been nothing that's happened in my life at all, but that person that was on the board didn't want me on there, and basically said it's either him or me. And I wasn't the one with the influence. I was the embattled pastor, so I got cut. So all that to say that I was lost in my own stuff, and I didn't know my way out. Needless to say, the way I responded was not good. I got in bad relationships quickly. My life very quickly didn't just look not like a pastor, but it didn't even look like I believed in Jesus. Like I was doing things that privately that was going on that folks kind of, okay, stuff's going on with Drew, not really sure. They'd try to engage. I would just kind of deflect and all that. So in 2019, I was really depressed, really low, and I decided to drink a little bit. In one instance, and I'd been up and down for several months, and I decided to drink, and then I decided, hey, might as well go to the store. Dumb, very dumb, and I don't want to make light of it because that's how people get killed. That's how people completely ruin their lives and other people's lives. And so I was just over the legal limit, but thankfully, before it got any worse, I was turning around to come back home. I was like, I know I shouldn't be doing this. Well, then I got stopped. And I thought I learned my lesson then, but I didn't. I went through ups and downs where that happened a few more times in my life. Now, that was over the span of like 2019 to 2021. And it was really bad. So during that time, I spent time in jail. I spent time on home incarceration. And again, I didn't know. Then when I felt like there were things that happened to me, and I was like, not almost like I deserved to be able to make these mistakes. Like people just don't understand. And I still feel like there's a lot of people that didn't understand, and even to this day.
Right.
You and I have talked several times. There are things that you don't understand until you go through them.
Yes.
And even as a kid, I felt like, and I was raised not to be judgmental, and it was a natural part of me too. Like I never wanted to judge anybody. But now, knowing the things that I've gone through, anybody that's gone through a split in their family, anybody that's gone through addiction issues, anybody that's gone through ministry crashes, it's really tough for me because I know that that nobody really understands the depths of that. When you've had to have a family split or all those things, it's very difficult.
And all at once. The family part, the ministry part, all of it just falling. Oh, I can't imagine.
So I didn't respond well. And I tell you, it's funny because when I talk to folks, even now, so not to go too deep into it, but there's a question always about like, does God cause things to happen? Does he allow things to happen? Is it part of both? So here I am, right? A pastor, things are going great. Then things were looking like they were going great. I still thought they were to a certain degree, but all these things happen. It's a surprise to everybody. Oh, he had the perfect life. He had the perfect this, that. He was the pastor, and now everything's falling apart. And now look what the decisions he's making. Are you kidding? And so God didn't cause any of that to happen. Mm-hmm. But so in Romans, so Paul is talking about how people were doing things they really weren't supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Romans chapter 1 talks about a lot of perversion and things that were happening, right? While mine wasn't the exact same, I was chasing things and people rather than the Lord, and that did turn into some very immoral situations for me. And just as in the book of Romans, Paul says that the Lord removed his hand of protection, basically. He gave them over. If you've ever been in church or read scripture much, you hear about how the Lord will give people over to their sins. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that he doesn't love them anymore. Doesn't mean that there's a broken, like I'm not still a Christian. It's just like, it's like my parents at one point that had been helping me so much. It's at one point they had to say, Drew, we've done everything we can do. What's going to happen in your life is what's going to happen. Right. So my parents had to do that, but God did that to me too. God didn't cause me to drink. He didn't cause me to drive after I drank. Mm-hmm. He didn't cause me to say certain things that broke relationships. I did that all on my own. Mm-hmm. And so I want to make that very clear so people a lot of times have questions like, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yes, I've heard that a lot.
Well, for a while, and I think even at the core, like even though we're good people and we have good intentions and God uses us for good things, still we're broken people.
Yes.
And if we were perfect, we wouldn't need Jesus.
Right.
So every one of us are broken. So I was acting out of that brokenness. It wasn't that God caused anything. And so I think that's a discussion that I'd love to have another time too, because yes. As a pastor, I used to get that all the time. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, it's hard to start with the premise that none of us are really good people.
Right.
When you see somebody that goes through an unimaginable loss and they're a great person going through that, well, my trouble came because of, like I said, it started brewing in other places, mm-hmm. and then I took it and ran with it. I didn't deserve a better life. I'm a broken person, but God was right there the whole time and then said, all right, Drew, I've shown you steps mm-hmm. along the way. When I was hospitalized for pancreatitis, and a good buddy of mine who's a doctor looked at me and said, Drew, listen, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And if this number turns to this, you're going to be in ICU. And once you get there, man, we don't know what happens. So I tasted death for a moment. Mm-hmm. And it still didn't get through to me. God gave me a lifeline so many times. Mm-hmm. I mean, the amount of times that I got in trouble with the law, like I'm not a felon right now. And there are people that have done less than me as far as the amount of times, and they're felons. Mm. Like God had shown me so many times,
mercy
Drew,
and grace.
And then I was a mess. I was trying to figure out psych medication at the same time, mm-hmm. and alcohol on top of that. Like that's tough enough process in its own.
Yes.
I was irrational. I remember one time I got so sick, and I was unresponsive in my house, and a good friend of mine drove from Williamsburg because I called him. He knew I was messed up, and he ended up coming into my house, and I was gone. I was out of it, barely breathing, and I had food in my mouth. And anyways, long story short, paramedics had to come and get me because I was unresponsible. When they started moving me, I started choking. Well, they had to suction me all the way to the hospital. It was right at the height of COVID. I wake up, and my little brother's standing over me. I didn't know where I was, how I got there, and he had to explain it to me several times. So I go through their detox process. I get basically unintoxicated with a bunch of fluids, and then I wanted to leave. It was raining outside. I didn't have my shoes, didn't have my wallet or anything, but they couldn't keep me. So I left. Couldn't call anybody or whatever. And I walked from the hospital to the other end of the bypass in the rain with those hospital socks. My feet were blistered and cut. They were bleeding. I was so irrational. And then I had some more alcohol before the end of the day. That's how bad I was saturated.
Yeah.
And I was physically dependent upon alcohol. So everything in my life was revolving around just trying to forget everything. I was wounded. I was hurt. And there were a lot of assumptions made about me anyways. And so I couldn't shake those. So a lot of people don't know this. I'm rebellious by nature. I've got a reputation of being a nice guy. You know, I get that, and I'm very thankful for that. But a lot of times if people tell me I couldn't do something, I would do it. Oh, yeah. Even if it was for my own good. I would do it anyways.
Yeah.
Well, so when people started acting like I was drinking all the time or acting like I was just throwing my life away, and when that's the reception that I got from a lot of people, then I was just like, well, heck with it. Might as well do it. At least I can forget about it for a few hours.
Oh, no.
Then I would wake up, and anybody that's had issues with alcohol or substance abuse, you wake up, not only is the problem still there, it's worse. And I just kept going and kept going. Well, through all that whole time, then COVID happens, and I'm not seeing my sons because they had school set up at their home, and I knew I wasn't spending time with them, so I had an opportunity to go to a discipleship center called the LA Dream Center, and basically you go out there. It's all structure, it's all in scripture and prayer, and you work a job. And my job was helping feed 7,000 meals a day in the height of COVID. It was the largest homeless shelter and food bank and all that in Los Angeles, and also in California as well. And so I was working. My breakfast job was scrambling 1,550 eggs a morning.
Oh my goodness!
I would do that. I had a big flat top grill, and and it was so cool because the guy that ran the kitchen, he was Wolfgang Puck's right hand man in a lot of his LA restaurants, and so he came to run this kitchen. It's just a unbelievable deal. If anybody's listening or watching, you can look up LA Dream Center. It's incredible. So I live there.
This sounds like an amazing place.
Oh, it's incredible. It's free, but it's funded by famous. Like when I was there, they said, "Hey guys, listen," because it was height of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, "Listen, we got somebody special coming in. They're a big time donor. Just make sure everything looks good. You make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do," which we did anyways. We had to every day. It was very strict. Yeah. And so we stand out next to our bunks and everything, and here comes a group of people, and Selena Gomez was in the back. She had just given like $2 million to the Dream Center, and I mean, it was things like that all the time. And so we didn't get to meet her. We had to stay away, COVID and everything. But we knew she was there.
Yeah, we got to wave.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, Selena, what's up? That's Justin. That's still not a thing. It's not a thing, but whatever. But anyway, so that was in 2020. Something happened back here in my personal life, and I came straight home from Los Angeles. While we worked on that, I still had a lot of mistakes to make. Up and down, up and down. October of 2023, it's really bad again. I was in a new relationship with an amazing woman who I'm engaged to right now. Her name is Trisha. Yep, she's incredible. She met me so crazy. I was on home incarceration when we started seeing each other. People are going to wonder how in the world that happened. I'll tell you that story some other time. It was honestly I love it.
The best love story ever.
It's incredible, but it really was. It was only God, and we talk about it right now because if we even said this to a couple friends the other night. If I was applying for somebody to date me and I put all my qualities and the things in my current situation on paper, and then she had a current situation that was very difficult for her, had nothing to do with being in jail or home incarceration. She had suffered an incredible loss. Our daughter, we have a little girl, but her daddy had passed away while Trisha was pregnant. And so here she's emerging from that situation. I am in home incarceration, but I'm growing. I've decided through the help of some mentors too, and some pastor friends that would come and visit me, that nobody knows that they were there. They didn't do it for any publicity or anything like that, but they were huge for me. I had So anyways, I can tell the story later about some more detail. If y'all want to know, hit me up.
Yes.
But that's how we started dating, and then I fell in love with this little girl. And so now I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter. I've got, I hate the word stepson, but a lot of people use bonus or whatever, but I just say I got another, I got another son, even though his daddy is very active in his life and stuff like that, but he's one of us. And then I've got 3 sons, 20, 19, 16. So in October, things were getting really bad. And my fiance said, honey, I'm not leaving you. She said, but this has got to change. Because it's now going to be where it starts to affect our little girl's life, my son's life, and ours together too. Just something's got to change. So I went on my own. I said, okay, it's time for me to go somewhere. She made a couple of calls. A couple of friends of mine found another location for me. I was gone for the whole month of October. So October the 4th of 2023 was the last time that I took a drink, and it's still the last time to this day.
Yay.
Yeah. By the time, I don't know when this is going to come out, but the 4th of every month is my sobriety month.
Yes.
So this is a big one, because here in a couple of days it's going to be 18 months. It's a year and a half. So I've stayed in a program. Once I came home, I stayed in a program that I'm still part of to this day. It's online, it's Zoom and all that. And I still go and test every week. I don't have to. It's not court ordered. I do it for my own accountability. Nobody has ever asked me, but I've got proof of every single test I've taken. Completely clean, never had a drink, never had a drug. Drugs were never my deal anyways,
right.
But I still get tested for that. Just I want to show people. So I've lived my life very clean of substance, and since then, things are absolutely incredible, and they've turned around. I've still got some issues that I'm working through that really had kind of started during all that time, and that really aren't completely over right now. But the cool thing is one of the scriptures that I was led to this whole time. This passage of scripture has been my favorite and my least favorite too, which I can tell you about that in a moment. But it's been my favorite even a long time before that all this mess started. And then it especially became real to me once I finally turned my heart back over to the Lord, because what I found was He hadn't left me at all. I was the one that left, but when I turned around, He was as close as He ever was during my best time as a pastor.
I love that. I got chills.
Well, it's something, because when you speak and you're just a human speaking, and good grief, last week you had 3 hours to prepare. The week before that you had 20 hours to prepare, and then this week all heck broke loose at home, and then boys doing this, and then we got a ball game, and this one was rained out, and all life was happening. And then I'm like, gosh, I'm preaching tomorrow, and you spend 45 minutes, and then you deliver that message, and then 5 people accept Christ or whatever.
Yes.
That's a really crazy feeling, because then it's not you, it's God, right?
Right.
So those times where I really felt close to the Lord, and then knowing that for, like I said, 6 years, I was up and down, up and down, up and down. And then when I turned around, He was right there, just as close as He was when I was seeing people come to the Lord. So the scripture that was, like I said, my favorite and least favorite a long time ago. I'll explain that. But it comes from Philippians chapter 1. I'm going to read just a few verses. This is 19 through 26. Okay. Now this is Paul, and he is suffering right now. So you got to think about it. While I'm not Paul by any means, and his suffering came from a different reason than my suffering. A lot of mine was self-induced. Paul was in chains because of Christ, because he was preaching about Christ, and people didn't like that, and it challenged the government, it challenged the leadership, and it really kind of shook people up, because Paul wasn't shutting up no matter what. So here he is. He finds himself in jail, and he's so you got to see this situation really difficult, but he's writing letters. He says, "For I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, that this will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage now, as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death." So what he is saying is, look, what I'm going through is going to serve for my deliverance. And Christ is going to be exalted, whether it's by me living and being able to preach more about him, or by my death and people knowing that the reason why this all happened is because I'm in chains for the Lord.
Yes.
So it's his expectation, his eager expectation, meaning that this is what I hope happens through this, and this is what I know if I just can just keep my heart right, that what's going to happen here will turn out for my deliverance. I'm either going to be delivered from this back to be able to preach, or I'm going to be delivered from this world and go be with Jesus.
Right.
So he says after this, this is great. This is like a coffee mug verse or whatever. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and the joy in the faith, so that in me you may have ample cause to glory in Christ Jesus because of my coming to you again. So here's Paul, who's in a mess because of other people, but he has not turned his back on the Lord. But the same principle, though, to think that, okay, Drew, you can stay in this mess, you can wallow around and whatever. And Paul's almost like he's got this choice. Okay, do I live or do I die? Well, if I live, then I can preach about Jesus. If I die, then I'm going to go be with Jesus. Beth, I got to the point where I wasn't suicidal. I said things that kind of sounded like it sometimes, but I knew what not to say. But even though I was not suicidal, I still wanted to die. I would say things like, and I really did mean this, that my sons would be better off if I just wasn't here. That my parents would be better off if I just didn't cause them more trouble. And my only escape from that, and so there were nights that I hoped that I wouldn't wake up after drinking. But while I was away in that October, the thing that I needed to do, I needed to get over the physical side of being dependent upon alcohol, because I couldn't function without it. Once I got through that, I started thinking more rationally. And this scripture, this is my favorite book of scriptures, is Philippians. And this just kept coming up that, you know what, to live is Christ. So I had tasted death a couple of times. And then emotionally I had too, and spiritually I had too. So you had the physical things I was putting myself through, right, which was bad. I literally, if I had continued on, I wouldn't be sitting here, even if I wanted to live. Right. If I'd continued on that path, I would have killed myself. Yes. So physically, I had tasted death. Emotionally, I had as well, because I thought I might as well shouldn't even be here. I'm just causing trouble for everybody. Spiritually, I knew that God wasn't pleased, and my life was no longer an example to others to be like, yeah, that's why Jesus is great. I mean, look at Drew. That wasn't happening. And then mentally, my mind was gone too. But once I got the alcohol out of me, and I started being able to think more rationally, and then God started bringing back to mind the scriptures and stuff that I'd lived for so long, this was it. This helped pull me out. Not because I was in chains the way Paul was, but because I had a choice to make at this point. I'm like, look, is God going to be honored in my life by my death or by sticking around? Yes, to leave is far better. If I can be with Jesus, man, this all goes away. Yes. But if I stick around, it means more fruitful labor. I knew that there was more left for me to do. Yes. And now looking back, I'm not going to let 6 bad years where I was letting the devil win in my life. I'm not going to let that paint the picture for the rest of the story that I've got to live. And now, listen, if somebody would have said to me years ago when I felt the call to ministry, heck, when I was a teenager and was kind of like thinking, what's my life going to look like? If somebody were to say to me that at 44 years old I would be where I am right now and had lost and had given away and had caused trouble, had received trouble, and would be at this point in my life, I would have said, no, I don't want that at all. And while I'm here now, there wasn't any happiness during that moment, but I found joy again. And joy is not based on my circumstances. If it was all circumstances, then I wouldn't have joy while I'm sitting in a home incarceration, getting to meet this wonderful lady who, had to come from the Lord because she's a saint. To step into that situation. Yes. And for us to still be a thing, you know. Like there were not, those situations I had in life were not happy moments, but then I started finding joy, because joy is something that Jesus gives us that can't be taken away. I mean, Jesus was full of joy, and he got killed for what he came to the earth to do. Yes. That's not happiness, but he even died with joy. Yes. And so I look back, and now I'm at that point where things are more joyful in my life. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that kind of brings me up to speed a little bit. I've got a few more things that I would love to share, but I'm going to take a drink of.
Yes. Well, and I just want to also mention that, we don't realize, and the thing that the Lord really pointed out to me when hearing Andrew's testimony the first time is we don't realize how much our pastors are under, how much they have on them. They do sermons, they're there for everybody, they're taking care of the flock, but they're there for the sick, they're there at the hospital, they're there at the funeral home, they're there at the weddings. They're always there. And that's one thing that the Lord really pointed out to me when hearing Andrew's testimony is how much is on our pastors, and should all this be on them, and we've talked about that in other episodes, but I love hearing your story and how God's mercy and grace just came upon your life and got you through everything. And I'm so thankful because I just see you being such a light to so many. And always has been, whether it's at a ball game saying hi to you or going deep in, scripture or with something you're going through. I'm just so thankful that you are on the other side of this and that you have that joy and that, and just, I think we all go through different things, and a lot of times we don't know what everybody's going through. And they need Jesus. We all, like you said, we are all broken and need Jesus. And if we can be that light to someone else and not be so, judgmental or, Jesus looks at the heart. And I think that's something, a lesson that we all could take away from it. And is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, a couple things, if that's okay.
Yes.
I know I've been talking for a while. But there are a few things. I'm glad you said that about the weight on a pastor. Pastors are men and women. They're not Jesus. Part of it we bring on ourselves because there is a God complex, okay? Like for me, I grew up with a microphone in my hand from a young age. If somebody needed to speak about something, I've always been comfortable. The thing is, for a lot of us, the microphone is pretty intoxicating. Right? Because you can go from influencing people and being persuasive about something to manipulation. And that's something that a lot of people fight against, or they need to, because it's a stress and a pressure. But so what I'm saying is, along those lines, is we start thinking that when people tell us, hey, that was a great sermon, and people tell us that we're really good people and all that, we start to believe it a little too much. So that has happened to me in different times of my life. But we're not God. I mean, if you think about this, and this could bring some theological questions out, but the very person that came to this earth that could snap his fingers and save everybody didn't. We have a personal choice, and so I'm glad that we were designed that way, because if you're forced to love, that's no love at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like our kids when they mess up and they're little, and we say, "You say you're sorry right now," and they go, "Sorry." They ain't more sorry than nothing. What did we just teach them? To lie?
True. Yeah, exactly.
To tick mom and dad off.
That's a good point.
It's just crazy. So if God created us with no free will and then forced us to love Him, there's no love at all. So we're allowed this room in our lives, right? So we are not perfect and cannot save anybody. We can lead people to the true source, but if they choose to take it, then that's on them. So a couple things that brings to mind. One, do not expect your pastor to be God. Don't. That is a pressure and a stress. And don't expect your kids to be perfect. Don't. Don't bring up the scripture or the scriptural principle that if you can't have your household in a line, then you can't teach in the church, all that kind of stuff. There are things that are thrown on a pastor and their family from scripture. A lot of it's how we've been raised and how it's been passed down, but just because somebody has been chosen and called to be that part of the church, which is one of many parts of the church. The pastor is not the only, the pastor is the person that's chosen to be the mouthpiece, but if there's not somebody in the church that displays other parts of the gifts of the Spirit, to make things, because look, if it was all about a pastor who's chosen to be able to speak and if all you are is a speaker, if all your church is somebody that can just kind of share the word in a good way that makes sense or whatever, but there's nothing else to kind of back you up, then as soon as that person, that man or that woman makes a mistake, if it's all on their shoulders, then
the whole thing crumbles.
The whole thing crumbles. So that's one thing. Do not expect that. Now, to the people in leadership, I know this is sad and this is tough, but it doesn't have to be this way. So when I'm getting ready to say, I don't mean to paint a horrible picture. I'm just painting a true picture that if people can come forward, there are a lot of pastors I know that have drinking problems. They have problems with pain pills. They have problems with pornography. They have problems with stepping outside of their marriage. All of this is to cope with a lot of things that we've got on us that we shouldn't, and the fact that we're broken and heading into it, right? Yeah. Now, that's not to excuse anybody's actions. Right. All those things that I mentioned has nothing to do with the Lord. Right. If we could put our heads down and just stay focused on Jesus, then we wouldn't so easily turn to other things. Now, some of those things I mentioned are ministry stoppers. Now, God can redeem people, and you can have a different type of ministry. You can still be used. I mean, I fully believe in 100% restoration. Your ministry might not look the same. I mean, just for instance, let's say somebody is a relationships counselor through the church or whatever, and then they end up doing something that completely just goes against that. Their next role might not be telling people how to have a healthy relationship. Exactly. But their next role might be talking with people who are broken and everything fell apart, and has this time of restoration, and say, look, here's what I did. Here's where I am now. God can do the same for you. Yes. So, but here's my point, though. There are pastors and leaders all over the place that if they knew they could step out and not just face immediate judgment, it could save so much.
Oh, that's good.
So much church stress, so many people's souls. Because think about when we put a pastor on a pedestal, it's happened around us. It's happened all over the nation. Folks, if you're not in tune with it, there's a lot of stuff going on in the church right now, the Big C church, that there's a lot of shaking going on, and it's something that Beth and I talk about a lot. And for so long, for so many years, me growing up in ministry, there's so many personalities that it's been built upon. Yes. And when you're building something so important and so crucial to life on something so fallible, then when it falls apart, there's a lot of people who are new to church, new to Christ, that have, and I understand part of that too. We grow into our faith. So at first, God uses a man or a woman in our life, and we put them on a pedestal because we see something in them that we want, or something that God used to bring us from it. But as we grow, we've got to grow away from worshiping a person to worshiping God.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. And one thing that I want to add is that I myself realized when I started seeing all these churches fall and, different pastors and things, I started realizing that I myself had exalted people, certain leaders, certain pastors. It can happen in the political world, anywhere. Anytime we exalt someone, they can fall. And that's something that I'm trying my best to make sure that after seeing so many ministries and churches affected by this, is to make sure that I'm not exalting a person, and that I'm giving God the glory for what the teaching they have given me, or the counseling they have given me, or, just for us to remember not to put anyone exalt anyone and put them on a pedestal, because they can fall if that happens. And if we love them, we don't want them to fall. So we're all human. We all fall short of the glory of God. So as long as we're exalting God and his glory and what he's doing through us, I think that's one of the things that we can do ourselves, even though we're not a pastor or maybe not a leader. That's something that we can do just as a believer in Christ.
I 100% thank you for putting in those terms, because a lot of folks, and I still deal with this sometimes too, that because of the pastoral role in my life and the way that I've kind of been wired and gifted to, people expect me to say certain things, and to hear words come from a dedicated believer that has not played that role, but has, played a part in the whole grand story of how churches are and relationships of the church. It's so good to hear that from someone who didn't used to be paid to preach and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But I will say this, and this is probably my last bit here, is my life went from, and I've explained this to a couple good friends here recently. I had a lot of relationships, a ton, right? And I still have a lot. But the nature of those relationships it was a mile wide. You could talk about anything, whatever. You'd help people with all kinds of things, but they were about an inch deep. There were very few of my relationships that were actually deep. The ones that were going into my mess are still there, coming out of it. Yeah. And so what I've chosen to do is I don't feel the pressure to be everybody's everything anymore. Now, I'm still available to folks. I still love people. I really do. I love people. And there are things that I think that I can do for folks, and there are things that I can't. But what I can do, and if I have the opportunity to, I will do it. But my life is totally different now, because I've said this before too, that loyalty is really proven in the tough times. Now, again, I put some folks in my personal relationships, I really put them to the test. But the ones that are still standing, when you look around and you finally realize that I finally said, all right, what am I going to do? And I turn around and God's been there the whole time. Very quickly after that, I see who's standing right behind him.
Oh, that's good.
There's a few people that were there the whole time and never left me. Yeah. Those are the people that you would do anything for, because you know they've done anything for you. Yeah. And it's just been, so I love relationships, but the deep, rich ones, you got to protect, and you can't have that level of relationship with everybody, no matter how much I love people, how much people love me.
Yes.
And now the cool thing is, here's the neat thing, is for a long time, it was very unpopular to even be around Drew Mahan, right? For a long time before that, it was, for several years, and I was just a guy that liked to have a good time, be funny, and talk about Jesus, and that's how I was living my life. And I've seen people come to the Lord and working through some struggles, things were good. And so people like to have me around, Yeah. I walked in a room, I wanted it to be better when I left, you know what I mean? Right. And so I get in this mode of holding court and making people laugh, right? So then all that was gone. I couldn't hold my head up in a grocery store. I felt so bad. If it hadn't been for my sons and my mom and dad living here, I would have been gone a long time ago. I would have gotten all the way from small town thinking and small town politicking and all that kind of stuff. But I'm here. I may not be here for the rest of my life, but I just remember that I had ruined a lot of things. But then when I was able to raise my head, the first person I saw was the Lord. Then soon after that, I saw Trisha. I saw my mom and dad. And I saw just a handful of really good friends. And I tell you what, those are my really good friends this day. And again, I love a lot of other people, but it's just changed my perspective. Yes. So be careful. A lot of people say they love you when it gets tested. And then be that friend for somebody else too. Yeah. There was one thing I'll say, and I know I could talk all day long, but I just do remember this. And I promise I'm going to end on a good note. I saw a pastor in town, and I was just coming out of one of those bad seasons. I did not know at the time, but I had another bad season to come. But I was feeling really good. And I was at an event at the middle school. And I walk in, and I go to shake somebody's hand. Wasn't a pastor. And this guy held his hand back. And he'd been going through some sickness, so I thought there was something that he may have been under some treatment. He couldn't. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I was like, you're not able. He said, no, I can shake hands just fine. And I was like, what's up? He said, I'm not going to shake your hand He said, the person you've become, I didn't think you were like that. It floored me. That's the first time I dealt with it face to face. Well, it gets a little worse. So I'm with my mom at the time. So I'm like, Mom, she didn't really hear that. Then we go, and it's an academic event for one of my sons who was at the middle school. And so I passed by a pastor in town. And he was a well-known pastor. And so I walked by and hey, buddy, how you doing? I reached my hand out, and he's got his phone. He's just going like this. And I thought, that was weird. He didn't hear me, so I leaned over and I tapped him on the knee. I was like, hey, bud, how you doing? I called him by name, and I stuck my hand out, and he goes like that and looked back down. I walked away. I went to him. I thought I was in the Twilight Zone. I was like, is there a camera? Somebody doing something to me? First of all, this guy outside tells me here's the main thing. And then a pastor, a respected pastor in town, he's no longer in town. So if anybody's trying to put the pieces together, just know that it's not somebody that's in corporate right now. But anyways, I later texted that guy, and I was like, hey, we've been through a lot together years ago. We support each other in this and that. What's going on? And he told me about a couple hours later, he said, I'm not debating this. He said, but you and I have a far different idea of what it means to be a pastor and what it means to live a life that's worthy of sharing the gospel. And he said, so I'm not going to talk about it. But he said, yes, I was cold to you. I'm sorry for how that made you feel. We've talked about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want anybody to apologize to me for how I'm feeling.
For how you feel.
Yeah. Sorry,
not
man.
Not what I did, but how you perceived it.
So to end on a good note, though, while that was a bad representation of Christ's love, mercy, and grace, I don't care. I will mention a couple people by name. I hesitate to because there's so many people that played, but Rick Holiday came down from Louisville. Alex Lockridge, he came over from First Baptist. Kenny Crawford came over. Alan Bonnell has been there for me. Those are the pastors that I'm talking about. Yes. Then there were other mentors, and some best friends, but those guys they went out of their way to represent the Lord in a time that they didn't even know what I'd done yesterday. And then heck, they did know what I'd done a couple months before because it was in the newspapers. Yeah. And they were still there. So be that representation. Don't be so quick to assume things. Yeah, I did mess up. Mm-hmm. There was some pain behind those mistakes too. Mm-hmm. But in all this, Beth, what I'll say to everybody who's listening and watching, no matter if it happened to you, you did it to yourself. If you look for it, God will not waste any of that stuff. Yes. He won't. He didn't cause it. He allowed it to happen. Nothing passes in front of him that he does not know. He is all powerful. He is all knowing. I believe that 100%. And he's all loving. I didn't get myself in the situation because God was some kind of puppeteer saying, this is going to go wrong and Drew's going to screw everything up just so he can come back to me. No, he said, I've tried. I'm here for Drew. He's got to take care of this stuff. I mean, he's got to come back to me. Yeah. So all the pain does have a purpose if we just are open to it and think, listen, just because things are better right now, not perfect. And I have to try every single day to deal with, I don't, thank God, I've not had a craving for a drink. Thank God. That's not the truth for everybody that's listening right now. And I've not. That's been an amazing thing. But I can't sit here and tell you right now that I'm never going to drink again. All I can say is I'm not going to drink today. And then tomorrow I'm going to have to say the same thing again. Yes. So that part is daily. There's a principle of one day at a time. Yeah. But, and also the resentments in my life. I mean, It's been clear through just me talking to you, there are resentments, and some of them I deal with so well, and then some of them I wake up and have to deal with them first thing in the morning. Yeah. But there's other people that are dealing with the resentments that I've caused. So I just got to remember, got to keep all that in perspective. Last thing I'll say, if you know somebody that is dealing with substance abuse, if you yourself are, I can only do what I can do, and I can point you in the right direction. I can share my personal story, some things that I have not shared. It's not really for public consumption at all, but I don't care how far gone you feel. Like I woke up in the hospital with the ventilator they had dragged in because they didn't know if I was breathing when I got there. I had a good friend look at me and say, Drew, this could turn bad, and if it does, man, once you go to ICU, we don't know what's going to happen. I've been there. I've lost everything. I've given everything away too. So I don't care where you are. You can get better. And I'm not saying it's not going to get worse before it gets better, because a lot of times it does. And you guys know, if you've hit your rock bottom, the bad thing is when you find out there's another one waiting. I don't care where you are, though. If you want to reach out to me, Facebook is a great way, through Messenger. I'm Drew Mahan pretty much on everything. I can point you in the right direction, and I can have conversations. I do that all the time. Folks come to me and say, hey, my son, my daughter, or them personally. Whatever it is, there is help. Don't feel hopeless. And yes, you probably will be judged, but got to get past that too. Because I would rather feel the shame of being judged now in my life than I would somebody having to be at my funeral because I checked out, or because I kept going so much that I killed myself even that way too. So anyways, if you're in trouble, you can, I don't care what position you hold in life, if you want to get a hold of me or get a hold of somebody, it's not, life is too beautiful to just throw it away.
Yes.
There's people on this earth that will absolutely be crushed because you're not here, and what you're doing right now could lead to that. So I want to say that.
Yes.
And thank you. I want to say thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. And I love his testimony, because, he was courageous and brave. And I know it takes a lot to share it, even now. I'm sure it takes a lot of courage to share it, even after the fact. But we just all need to go out and love like Jesus and be like Jesus. Realize that we all need him. We all are going through different things, some more so than others. And if we can just continue to pray for those people in ministry, pray for our friends, pray for those struggling, be the smile and the help that they need. Point them to the right place, and like Andrew said, and we're just so thankful that you have got your joy, and that the Lord has just done this restoration, and we just thank you for sharing your testimony, and I know it's going to bless so many out there. So thank you, and we will see you guys soon.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate you. Bye. Everybody. Thank you.